So as you all know, we've been doing a series on Jacob, and we finished last week discussing sort of in depth about Isaac's eyes growing dim and the meanings from it from the Midrash as well as the Zohar. And we're really approaching the end of that Torah portion, Toldot, which ends in sort of the blessing of Jacob. And the whole sort of on the surface, seemingly Meshuggah event of Jacob and his mother fooling Isaac into thinking that Jacob was Esau. So one of the things, there's a million, maybe not a million, I'm exaggerating, let's say 100. There's 100 things in this section that we could explore in depth that have all the symbolism and mysticism associated with it. So I started going through them one by one this past week, and I realized that this is silly. And I just sort of focused in on two. And two of them, one is the idea of the dualities, the unity and the duality, the twos, what they call the law of the twos, which goes back, of course, to Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau, like we're talking about now, and Cain and Abel, and it's throughout the Torah. You see it, these laws of twos. And when Kabbalistically we were looking in the Sefer Yetzirah, we have what's called the 7 double letters, and it's there in just so much of the philosophy and the teaching of the Torah and the Tanakh. But explicitly in this section, what's often overlooked is the idea of the union of the two, of the spiritual and the physical, right? So if you read this portion on its own and just on the surface, it's a very visceral portion. It's very engaged in the physical part of life. But it's a unification of the spiritual and physical in the sense that this is sort of a fight over the blessing. And blessing, we all think of in a spiritual way. When we think of blessings, we're thinking of spirituality. But this becomes a very physical section because as we said before, it starts off with his eyes being dimmed. So we have the senses involved now, right? So his eyes were dimmed, and we talked about all the reasons why. And as we get through this part of blessing, and Rivka's the hero again, it comes around to his eyes being opened at the end. So his eyes are dimmed for reasons we discussed last week. And then we go through this process, a very physical process. So if we think about this in terms of ourselves and in terms of the temple, the inner court, first of all, the Holy of Holies, the inner court, and then the outer court. We think like that. What we're saying here is essentially that there's a very thin, very razor thin veil between the inner court and the Holy of Holies, and likewise between the inner court and the outer court. And our experiences of them, because essentially one is embedded in the other, right? So when we look at it from the prism of the Sefer Yetzirah, we're looking at the Aleph in the Holy of Holies, which is timeless, spaceless, unified field, divine consciousness that permeates everything, that from which all blessings come. But they come through in this, what the Kabbalists call Seder HaShilshilot, in this particular order, right? And so they emanate from this Holy of Holies into the inner court and then the outer court. Now, sadly, in a way, in this day and age, we seem to be, as we evolve in so many ways, in a sad way, we get a little bit more and more removed from the essence because we lose touch with nature. I'm saying we in a very broad sense. Obviously, it doesn't mean everyone. Most of us here are connected in so many ways with nature, right? But if we look at society as a whole, you know, I'm not against technology and I'm not saying anything against technology, but all this technology and or even some of the really pleasures of life, having a nice house and having a great car and, hopping on a jet and going here and there, it sort of takes us away from the environment that Jacob, Isaac, Esau, and Revka were in. They were in an environment where it was obvious to them that blessings and happiness have a lot to do with what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're smelling, what you're eating, tasting, and touching in nature. And the essence, and we always say that UMI is sort of our mission statement, engaging the essence in ourselves and everything, right? So in this blessing, it becomes really evident because we're talking about a blessing which is purely a spiritual thing. So why all of this clamor about Jacob should have the blessing and Esau shouldn't have the blessing? On the surface, it seems a little mishugana, right? It seems a little crazy that we're going through all of this for this blessing. Same thing with the birthright, really, because as we discussed, Jacob wasn't looking for a big inheritance that he wouldn't get if Esau got the birthright. What he was looking for was a spiritual thing, because at that time, the firstborn were the ones who conducted the ceremonies, right? The sacrifices were done by the firstborn. So in his mishpachah, in that continuum from Abraham, that pure consciousness, that continuum, if it was going to be continued in that way ceremonially through Esau, it would be a curse and not a blessing. But Jacob wanted to bless the world, and that's what this is all about. Even in the blessing being cleverly taken from Esau and moved to Jacob, the intention was about how is this mishpachah, the continuum of Abraham's seed, is it going to be a blessing or is it going to be a curse? And that's the essence of it. In order to make that happen, Rivka, who we talked about walking in the light of the Shekinah, being a representative of the Shekinah itself, hears Isaac saying to Esau, and the Zohar says it's the Shekinah itself whispering to her what Isaac is saying to Esau. Go out and kill me some, do your thing, do your manly thing, go kill me some animals, give me the stuff I like. The way to my heart is through my stomach, and I will bless you. Revka knows the meaning of this blessing because of her enlightenment. She knows the meaning of this blessing for the whole mishpachah. Going forward and backward is very important because, like I just said, if Esau carries the blessing, he carries it in his way, in his grade, in the way in which he is. It's not that she loved Jacob more than Esau. It's not a typical favoritism in family. What it was she saw as an enlightened individual, the enlightenment of Jacob. We talk about these sides of the tree of life, where Esau is inclining himself totally now to the side of severity. Jacob more and more is gaining a balance between the side of chesed and mercy and kindness and wisdom. and strength and self-discipline through his meditation practices and his teachings with Shemin Eber and his mother. He has now experienced what's called in this tree of life, Teferet, which is a central column. It's a unification. And this is his wrestling now throughout his life, and we'll get into each portion of it, relating to this wholeness, leaning, as we said many times, but it's critically important. The north wind blows to the south into the garden. So the right side draws in the side of severity. The side of Chesed draws in the side of severity into the central column, Tiferet, which is what Jacob is. So Rivka understands that. She sees that. It's obvious to her in the world of Asiyah, in the world of action. The world where we've talked about many times, especially in the Sefer Yetzirah class, where these elemental letters come so much into play. So from Nisan to Elul, those 6 months, the elemental letters, the 6 elemental letters of each of those months are represented here in the blessing. This blessing is like a rebirth. The letter Hey for the month of Nisan is the sense of sight and vision, a spiritual sight and vision, right? And then we go to Vav, and it's the sense of sound. And Zayin is the sense of smell. So each one of these things are all represented in this portion. And we see it with Isaac. His eyes were dimmed. Then he goes through each one. So Revka sees to it that every one of the senses are a pathway, can be a pathway to enlightenment. So she's had in chapter 26, we talked about it. Isaac was doing the right thing. The family was being blessed. And then he began to justify Esau's behavior. And instead of inclining himself to the right, he was inclining himself to the right, meaning the side of chesed and mercy. He was inclining himself to severity. As that was happening, Esau was getting worse and worse. So Rivka sees this. She doesn't want the continuum of the blessing of the family to go in that direction. So she says to Jacob, go and get 2 goats, and we're going to prepare this meal for your father. It's another idea of the twos. And it eventually became that way with the sacrifice. And the sacrifice is both physical and spiritual, and the union of the physical and the spiritual. So through the senses, sense of vision, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell, also considered in speaking itself, the vibratory sense of speaking. And then, of course, taste, and then what's called coition or intercourse. All of these things are a unification of the spiritual and the physical in this laws of twos that I'm trying to get at here. And what I'm trying to say is, practically, when the rubber meets the road, we should be mindful of that always. Any blessing is not just a spiritual thing, it's a physical thing. Any physical thing can be a blessing. So the two are embedded in one another. When we go outside and we stand on the earth, actually feel it. Take your shoes and socks off. Feel the earth. Breathe in the air. See the sun rising. These are all blessings. And when we feel it through our senses, it becomes real. It's important because the sages will say as is evidenced in this particular Torah portion about the blessing. Without the physical, the spiritual is moot. And without the spiritual, the physical is moot. So it goes both ways. If I kiss you, it affects your soul. It affects your spirit. It affects the inner court. It's not just the physical sensation of being kissed. Likewise, if I smack you in the face, the same thing happens. You're affected spiritually, not just physically. And that's why this whole thing was such a big thing. And Revka understood all of that in her enlightenment and walking with the Shekhinah and being my sister, my bride, as Shir HaShirim says. So she calls Jacob and she says, this is what's going on, and this is what I want you to do. And he immediately says, wait a minute, if if my father discovers that I'm really not Esau, that I'm Jacob, he may give me a curse. She says, let the curse be on me. So fully confident in Hashem, in the name, in the divine consciousness, that idea of her being cursed is just not even relevant to her. So he goes about it, does it, and again, relating to us practically from our meditation process. And our meditation movements are a great way to do this. And I really strongly recommend that you don't ignore them. I know the foundation of our meditation practice is Hitboded, where we sit and we transcend and drill like we did like Isaac did in chapter 26, right? And that's really very important. But let's not ignore those movements, because we use every one of those letters that open up our senses. And we experience that movement of consciousness through those letters in that movement. So it's both. It's movement, and it's action, and it's nature, and it's the senses being awakened. And it's also spiritual, and it's unifying the Holy of Holies in the world of Asiyah. So let me just read directly from the Torah what I'm talking about and see if it makes sense to you. Okay. So we left off last time with Isaac telling him to go kill some animals and bring him the kind of food that he really likes. It says here, Rebecca has been listening while Isaac was speaking to Esau, his son. Esau went out to the field to trap some game and bring it home. Rebecca said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau. He said, bring me some game and prepare it into something tasty. I will eat it and bless you in God's presence before I die. She's speaking to Jacob now. Now listen to me, my son. Heed my instructions carefully. Go to the sheep and take 2 choice young kids. I will prepare them for a tasty recipe, just the way your father likes them. You must then bring it to your father so that he will eat and will bless you before he dies. Jacob says, but my brother Esau is hairy. I am smooth-skinned. Suppose my father touches me, he will realize that I am an impostor. I will gain a curse rather than a blessing. Rebecca says, let any curse be upon me, my son, but listen to me. Go bring me what I asked. so much sensory things going on here. You hear the listen, you hear the taste, you hear the speak, you hear all of those things that those first 6 elemental letters have the energy of awakening in us. They're on the wall here. Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, and Yud. Jacob went and fetched what his mother had requested. She took the kids and prepared them using the tasty recipe that Jacob's father liked best. Rebekah then took her older son Esau's best clothing, which she had in her keeping, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also placed the young goat's skins on his arm and on the hairless parts of his neck. So this clothing is another interesting piece, which is in the Zohar and the Midrash. The clothing is actually Adam's clothes from the beginning of creation that Nimrod somehow got a hold of, and Esau wrestled away from Nimrod. In fact, when Nimrod had the clothing of Adam, it didn't have the same smell or vibe, I would say, as it did with Adam. And when Esau wore it, it did not as well. I'm not making this up. It's from the Zohar, but I don't want to keep reading and reading and reading for an hour. We'll never get a chance to meditate. Nimrod didn't have the essence. He wasn't in touch with the essence. So therefore, it didn't flow through to his garment like it did with Adam. Neither did Esau. But when Jacob put on Adam's clothing, it gave off that essence, as we'll see as we go forward. Rebekah handed to her son Jacob the delicacy and the bread she had baked. He came to his father. Father, Abba? Yes, who are you? My son? It is I, Esau, your firstborn, said Jacob. Is that a white lie? What we might call it? I have done as you have asked. Sit up and eat the game I trapped, so that your soul will bless me. So you see this hardly any space between the physical and the spiritual here. How did you find it so quickly, my son? Asked Isaac. Yud He Vav He, your Lord was with me. Okay, so now Jacob responds as Jacob. So this is a little bit of a mistake in the treachery part. But in our learning, it's not, because it gives us a clue, right? Esau would never have said that. If Isaac had said, how come you got this so quick? He would have said, oh, father, you know how good a killer of animals I am. I went out there and I shot from 500 yards away, and a bow and arrow just landed right on its mark. How wonderful am I? That whole narcissistic thing would be very strong. But the opposite is Jacob. Jacob says, it's Yud He Vav He that brought this food so quickly to you. He doesn't give himself the glory, he gives the glory to God. But Isaac realizes that that doesn't sound like Esau. Come closer to me, Isaac said to Jacob. Let me touch you, my son. Are you really Esau? I mean, think about it. It doesn't sound like Esau. Jacob came closer to his father Isaac, and Isaac touched him. The voice is Jacob's voice. So now we're talking about voice, right? Zayin, energy. And that voice, no, not Zayin. So Hey is sight, Vav is hearing, Zayin is smell, and Het is voice. So The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau, because now he's feeling all that hairiness that Rivka figured out he would want to touch. He did not realize who it was because there was hair on Jacob's arms, just like those of his brother Esau. Are you really my son Esau? I am, he says, Jacob. Then serve me the food. I will eat the game that you trapped so that my soul may bless you. Jacob served it, and Isaac ate. And then he brought Isaac some wine, and he drank it. His father Isaac said to him, "Come closer and kiss me, my son." This is the yud. The yud is coition, intercourse. But when we think of intercourse, most of us, especially the men, we think of one particular thing. But actually, of course, the intercourse is more than just that. It's that, but it's also a kiss, a hug. Really, the sense of touching is, in a sense, intercourse physically and spiritually. Like I said before, if I kiss you, it changes your spirit. Something happens in your soul. Then here, the sense of smell. Jacob approached and kissed him. Isaac smelled the fragrance of his garment and blessed him. Now his eyes are open, according to the Zohar, from the sense of smell, because he could smell Adam's garment, the essence through Adam's garment. And the Zohar goes into this is the essence of the Garden of Eden. He smells that field. The Zohar calls the field of apples. So he's awakened to have the experience of all of these 6 letters. And that enabled him to experience the oneness. So again, this is not about fragmentation. It's about the Holy of Holies in the world of action, in the world of the senses, coming alive. So then he blesses him. May God grant you the dew of heaven and the fat of the earth. Much grain and wine, nations will serve you, governments will bow down to you. You shall be like a lord over your brother. Your mother's children will prostrate themselves to you. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. Isaac had finished his blessing, Jacob of Jacob, and Jacob had just left his father Isaac when his brother Esau came back from his hunt. He had also prepared a delicacy and brought it to his father. Let my father get up and eat his son's venison. Even the way he just tells his father to get up is completely different than the way Jacob did. Zohar and the Midrash get into that. I won't. So that your soul may bless me. He's basically telling your father, get up and bless me. I got you what you wanted to eat. I am your firstborn Esau. Isaac was seized with a fit of trembling. What? Who? Where is the one who trapped game and just served it to me? I ate it all before you came, and I blessed him. The blessing will remain his. So it goes on, and of course, Esau has a little bit of a fit. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to read it all. But he also blesses Esau, but does not take away any of the primary blessing which went to Jacob. And he says to Esau, the fat places of the earth can still be your dwelling, and you will still have some dew of heaven, but you shall live by your sword. You may have to serve your brother, but when your complaints mount up, you will throw his yoke off your neck. Esau was furious at Jacob because of the blessing that his father had given him. He said to myself, the days of mourning for my father will be here soon. I will then be able to kill my brother Jacob. So the Shekinah tells Rebekah of Esau's plan, and Rebekah tells Jacob, time to pack up and move out and go to the land of my family, which we'll talk about next time. But I want to close with one more instruction. So what I'm talking about here is this law of the twos, which is immersed into one, two becoming one, the essence of the spiritual and the essence of the physical is the same. And the two combine. And this is a very practical thing for us in our prayers, in our meditations, in our charities, in everything that we do. Being mindful of the physical part being as important as the spiritual part, and really ultimately one and the same. And the other point I just want to make before we leave this, because we're going to go on to Jacob's ladder next time, is many people misunderstand this exchange and think of it as sort of a theft of, first of all, the birthright and now the blessing. And really, the Zohar explains, and I'll read just two quick passages from the Zohar. This is the essence of the law of karma. Because in fact, there was nothing stolen. Esau gets exactly what he deserves. What do they say? The law of karma is like a restaurant, the restaurant of karma. There's no menu. You get what you deserve. So in this case, that's exactly what it was. That's the way Esau was. So he got a blessing that was primarily a blessing of strength and severity and the earth, not the supernal and the earth, the spiritual and the physical. He was a very physical being, and he had trouble serving as a physical being, the spiritual. And that's what every one of these teachings is about, where Jacob combined them and became the equilibrium of both in Tiferet. Anyway, just to say what I'm saying here. Page. So here's what the kavanah of Jacob was, according to the Zohar. Jacob came with craft, clever, and misled his father. What the object of bringing blessing upon the world. So that was his point. His object was bringing blessing upon the world. It was, and to recover from the serpent what hitherto he had withheld from the world. So this goes back to Adam, who was also the fullness and also Tiferet and also beauty. And it was taken from him was the ability to bless the world and all of creation. And Jacob is taking that back in this blessing. As opposed to Esau, it was measure for measure, as expressed in the Psalm. He loved cursing, Esau, and it came unto him. He delighted not in blessing, which was far from him. This was just an expression of who they each were. Jacob thus turned each curse into a blessing. And what he took was really his own. God brought all this about so that Jacob should remain attached to his own place and portion, and Esau would remain attached to his place and portion. Jacob thus inherited the fruit of the supernal earth, and we talked about the supernal world, and the supernal heaven. Esau, on the other hand, was given his blessing on earth here below, and the below heaven. Further, Jacob was given a portion both above and below, but Esau only here below, just as they were in their lives.